So it's spring, you're inside, and suddenly you get an alert that a tornado warning is in effect for your area. The problem: a tornado warning either had never been issued for your area or just infrequently, leading you to put off making a plan for yourself and or your family. So what do? Do you know where to go? Do you know what to do? Hopefully you do. And people certainly should practice tornado safety, practice it more than they do. It's important to have a preparedness and safety plan, regardless of where you live or how likely it is that you can have a tornado in your area. Because what if it does happen and you don't have a plan? Then you'll find yourself in a predicament. But by listening and seeing how you should have a plan, you'll find yourself better prepared for a storm that comes out of nowhere. So even though we don't have many tornadoes in Michigan, last year certainly being an exception with August, it's always a good idea to have a tornado preparedness plan in place, especially around spring and summer when weather conditions can be so unstable and so favorable for tornadoes to form. So while I'm not a weather person or anything, I do take safety seriously, especially tornado safety seriously, and think others should as well. So first I will talk about why you should care about a tornado preparedness plan even in Michigan. Second, I will talk about what happens or what might happen to people who don't have tornado preparedness plans. And third, I will talk about tornado plans as outlined by places like the CDC and the Red Cross and what you should do. Um, so last summer, even though we don't have many tornadoes in Michigan, it was said by the Click on Detroit is what I found, that 7 tornadoes touched down in Michigan, and that's a pretty big number for Michigan, especially at once. So with that in mind, it's a good idea to have a preparedness plan in place, especially around spring and summer when weather conditions can be so unstable. So before last summer, we probably thought that severe storms with tornadoes are unlikely to happen here in Michigan. I mean, we've had them before, but very sporadically and very isolated incidents with very little actual touchdowns. More warnings than anything. The Weather Channel, on their article, "Here's how many tornadoes your state sees in a typical year," said that it's around 16 tornadoes a year in Michigan. So that's about 9 others besides what we had. And you might think to yourself, but Michigan tornadoes tend to be more weak, right? Which is true in a sense. Last year's tornadoes were certainly an exception, that they don't last very long, but you still want to be prepared for that. And people in Michigan and other places, I'm sure, aren't really aware that March is Tornado Preparedness Month. And it makes it all the more important because March may not be a month where a lot of tornadoes are possible, but you want to be prepared for the months that are. So now that I've talked about conditions and why it can be important to have a plan almost any time of the year, I will move on to talk about what might happen if you don't have a plan. So being caught off guard without any kind of plan for a storm can be dangerous. And though tornadoes are unpredictable, having a plan greatly helps. So not having a plan can mean you're ill prepared or you can't find shelter in enough time that you should, or and that you might be more likely to have more injuries or even worse. So it's always a good idea to plan for that. So now, having talked about possible consequences of not having a plan, I will now go over what entails having a successful plan and staying safe during such weather events, as well as knowing the difference between a tornado watch and a tornado warning. So according to websites such as the CDC and the Red Cross, the following is what they recommended for having an effective plan. So one thing I saw was knowing where your basement was, and which is basically saying use it as like a meeting place if you're not with other members of your family or whatnot. because seconds count during. And like another thing was practicing tornado drills every so often and making sure you know where your basement is and where to go if you're out on the road or something like that. And signing up for free emergency alerts because the local governments can provide that because tornado warnings are more localized than watches and are often issued by the local National Weather Service office. So another thing was getting your emergency supplies together, an emergency kit together in case you lose power for several days. And knowing what the signs of a tornado and what it looks like and what it sounds like, because most people say that a green sky comes before a tornado, or that it might sound something like freight train. So now I will present the graphic. So this is the graphic, and like I said, the watch, I don't know if it's kind of fuzzy, but so the watch area is more large and covers more counties, and it is more of a like spread out thing, and it's issued a lot more in advance. Whereas a warning is issued by the local National Weather Service office, and it's a lot more urgent and is more imminent with the watch, meaning that the conditions are favorable for such a thing to happen. So and I just say that because there are people who don't know the difference, and it's easy to get mixed up with that. So we have talked about the following. One, why you should care about tornado preparedness even in Michigan. What might happen if you don't have an effective tornado preparedness plan, and what entails a successful tornado preparedness plan, as well as the differences between a tornado watch and tornado warning. So again, we don't get many tornadoes here in Michigan, especially compared to other states. But it's still a good idea to always have a tornado preparedness plan in place, especially around spring and summer. So in conclusion, I hope that you all have at least begun thinking about your tornado safety procedures. If you don't have any, then hopefully you will begin thinking and use the resources that I have mentioned that are highly useful. As I said before, it's very important to have a plan in place regardless of where you live. And hopefully this speech has either convinced you of that or it has reinforced that.